My fiancé vanished a week before our wedding, leaving no explanation. When he finally returned, he said, "I needed time." But the real reason shattered everything. For as long as I can remember, I've been a creature of habit. I work 6 days a week at Vinyl Revival, this dusty little record shop on South Congress in Austin. If you've ever been there, you'll remember the smell, a mix of old leather, musty vinyl, and a whiff of lavender from the candle I keep burning by the counter. I've been working there for 6 years, and it's home. The music, the customers, the way I can lose myself in endless rows of records, it's all mine. The other constant in my life? Ron. I met him on a sweltering Saturday afternoon back in 2018 at one of those obnoxious food truck festivals down by Zilker Park. I was in line for an overpriced taco when it came out of nowhere, and I managed to spill half my beer down my shirt in an attempt to dodge it. That's when I heard this low chuckle behind me. I turned around, face flushed, and there he was, Ron. I remember thinking he looked like he stepped straight out of a GQ spread, with his clean-cut look, perfectly fitted polo, and those dimples. I could feel the irritation bubbling up in me, but he just kept laughing, his whole body shaking like he'd never seen anything funnier. And, somehow, I couldn't help but laugh, too. The rest is history, as they say. We went out for tacos that same night, and suddenly, I was dating this man who seemed like the opposite of everything I ever thought I'd want. Ron was an accountant at some big firm downtown, all buttoned up and organized in a way I'd never been. He had routines, schedules, and talked about things like mortgages and 401ks, while I was just happy to have enough in my savings to cover an emergency. But he made me laugh, and every time he smiled, those dimples just melted me. 3 years into our relationship, on a weekend getaway to Marfa, he proposed. It was late, the desert sky spilling over with stars, and he got down on one knee, the wind stirring his hair. I remember staring at him, thinking, this is it. I knew he was my person. Ron's mom, Darlene, was a force to be reckoned with. She had her own vision of what our wedding should be, a lavish affair at this sprawling estate out in Fredericksburg. I didn't want anything fancy, just a small gathering, a little music, and maybe some barbecue. But Darlene wasn't having it. Everyone deserves a fairy tale, Molly, she'd say in her syrupy southern drawl, waving her hand around like she was blessing me with good fortune. When you marry my son, you're becoming part of this family. And the Johnson family, she'd look at me meaningfully, a touch of warning in her eyes, does things right. I bit my tongue. Ron looked so happy, and honestly, a small part of me was, too. It felt like we were building something. So I went along with it. I agreed to the venue, the dress fittings, the color schemes, even the Dove release Darlene insisted on. But as we got closer to the big day, I could feel the pressure building. Not just from the wedding, but something else. A nagging feeling I couldn't quite place. Then, a week before the wedding, everything fell apart. It was a Friday morning, and I woke up alone. Ron's side of the bed was cold, and there was no note, no text, nothing. His phone was still on the nightstand, silent as the grave. I figured maybe he'd gone for an early workout, but as the hours ticked by, unease started to creep in. By noon, I was calling his phone every half hour, pacing the apartment, leaving increasingly panicked voicemails. Ron? Are you okay? Please call me. I don't understand where you are. By the time the sun went down, I was losing my mind. I'd called Darlene at least 3 times, but she kept brushing it off. Honey, men get cold feet, she'd said with this breezy laugh. I remember when I married Ron's father. Oh, I thought he'd never show up on time, but he did, and we've been married 36 wonderful years. Don't you worry your pretty little head. Darlene, he isn't picking up. He's just gone, I said, my voice cracking. I could feel my hands shaking. This isn't like him. Well, maybe he's just clearing his head, darling, she said, sounding almost bored. Men like to have their space. It's the week before the wedding, for heaven's sake. He'll turn up. I spent that whole night in bed, clutching my phone like a lifeline, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every creak in the apartment made me hope he was finally home. But the minutes dragged into hours, and still, nothing. When morning came, I was numb. My mind was in a fog, and I started to imagine all the terrible things that could have happened. Had he been in an accident? Was he hurt somewhere, alone, without his phone? I called everyone, his friends, his coworkers, even his gym. No one knew anything. The hours felt like days, the days like years. By Monday, I was at my breaking point. I couldn't eat, couldn't think. I went to the police station, my hands trembling as I filled out a missing persons report. I kept thinking, this can't be happening. This isn't real. Tuesday night, as I sat alone on the couch, my phone rang. My heart jumped, and I scrambled to answer it, praying it was the police with some news. But when I picked up, there was only silence on the other end. Just a heavy, labored breathing. Hello? Ron? Is that you? My voice sounded weak, almost unrecognizable. The silence stretched on, and just as I was about to hang up, I heard him. Molly. I froze, clutching the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Ron? Oh my God, where are you? Are you okay? What happened? The questions tumbled out of me, my voice frantic. I'm sorry, he murmured, his voice barely audible. I needed some time. Some time? The words hit me like a slap, and suddenly all the fear, all the worry, twisted into something darker, something I didn't even know I was capable of feeling. Anger. You needed some time? I said, my voice rising. You disappear a week before our wedding, no call, no text, nothing, and all you can say is you needed some time? Are you kidding me? He sighed, the kind of sigh that you only hear from someone who's carrying something heavy. Molly, please. I didn't mean to scare you. I had to get away, to clear my head. Clear your head? My voice was trembling, half with rage, half with disbelief. Ron, what's going on? Are you having doubts? Cold feet? What is this? There was a pause, long enough that I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. And then he said, in a voice so low it was almost a whisper, I just don't know if I can do this. His words hung in the air, filling the room with a cold emptiness. I couldn't breathe. I'd been so focused on planning, on making sure everything was perfect for him, for his family, that it never even occurred to me that he might be the one with doubts. What are you talking about? I whispered, my voice breaking. Ron, you're the one who proposed. You're the one who wanted this. How could you? How could you just disappear? I don't know, he said, sounding defeated. I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought. But then it all started to feel so final. Final? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Ron, we've been together for years. Did you think marriage was going to be some grand mystery? He was silent, and I could feel the distance between us growing, like an invisible wall was rising, blocking him out. Finally, he whispered, I'm sorry, Molly. I don't know. There was a long silence, and I heard him take a shaky breath. Maybe I need more time. A week before our wedding, and he was telling me this now, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I felt him slipping further away. I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of his words settling over me like a stone. All the fear, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, and now he tells me he needs more time? After I've practically given up my life to fit into his world, to make his mom happy, to try to make him happy, all for him to pull this stunt a week before our wedding? No, I whispered, my voice barely audible, a storm brewing inside me. No, Ron, I think you've had enough time. He stammered, Molly, come on, don't be like this. I just need to figure things out. I want to make sure I can be the husband you deserve. I almost laughed at that, but it wasn't a laugh of humor. It was cold, raw, the sound of someone who had finally hit their limit. The husband I deserve? You want to be the husband I deserve by running away without a word? By letting me think you were dead or hurt? By letting me sit here for days, alone, terrified, only for you to come back and tell me that you need more time? I shook my head, feeling a strange, calm fury settle over me. You know what, Ron? I said, my voice steady, take all the time you need. In fact, take forever, because I'm done. I'm not going to be the one waiting around for you to decide if I'm worth it. The line was silent. I could practically hear his jaw drop on the other end. He stuttered, wait, Molly, what are you saying? Are you really? Yes, Ron, I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. I'm really done. And guess what? I'm going to move forward with my life. I'm not your backup plan, I'm not your safe option, and I'm sure as hell not someone who waits around while you find yourself. So go ahead. Find yourself. But you won't find me waiting for you when you're done. The phone fell silent, and I didn't care. I hung up before he could respond. It was like flipping a switch, a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in days, I felt free. The next day, I called everyone. I called the vendors, the caterers, the florist, and the dove handler, Darlene's idea, and canceled every last bit of the wedding. I didn't want a cent of it to go to waste, so I made sure to tell them to open up the bookings for someone else. It was oddly cathartic, wiping away the plans that had felt like chains around my neck. I didn't care what Darlene would think or what Ron would tell her. I was done. But there was one last thing I had to do. 2 days later, with a newfound sense of calm and a not-so-small dose of determination, I found myself standing on Darlene's doorstep. She opened the door, dressed in one of her pastel silk robes, her usual perfectly polished facade faltering for a moment when she saw me. Molly, she said, trying to mask her surprise. Is everything all right? Oh, everything's great, Darlene, I said, forcing a smile. Ron and I are done. The wedding's off. Her jaw practically hit the floor. Excuse me? Yep, you heard me. Ron called me up, said he wasn't sure he could go through with it, that he needed time. So I told him to take all the time in the world. Darlene sputtered, clearly in shock. You can't be serious, Molly. Think of the embarrassment, the money we've spent, the people we've invited. Actually, I thought about it a lot, I said, enjoying the surprised look on her face. And then I realized that none of that was really about me, was it? It was all for you, the perfect wedding, the fairy tale. Well, you can still have your fairy tale, just not with me. Darlene's expression shifted, the shock turning to a cool, calculating stare. Do you really want to throw away everything over one little moment of doubt? Darlene, it wasn't a moment of doubt. It was a week of hell, with me sitting alone, thinking the man I loved was dead or hurt, only for him to waltz back in and tell me he needed time. So no, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm setting myself free. Her lips pursed, and she looked me up and down, as if seeing me for the first time. Fine, she said, her voice ice cold. But don't expect any help from us in the future. You're cutting yourself off from this family. And just like that, it clicked. That's just fine by me, I said, smiling. Because I don't want to be part of a family that thinks they're doing me a favor by letting me exist in their world. Without waiting for her response, I turned on my heel and walked away, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in years. I was done with Ron, done with Darlene, done with trying to fit myself into their expectations. In the days that followed, I focused on myself. I'd been with Ron for so long that I'd almost forgotten what it was like to make decisions just for me. I started going to art shows, volunteering at a local animal shelter, and even took up guitar lessons. I didn't need anyone to make me happy, I was learning to make myself happy. One Saturday, about 2 months later, I was at my favorite coffee shop in South Congress, sipping on a latte and reading a book. That's when I heard a familiar voice. Hey, Molly. I looked up, and there he was, Ron, standing awkwardly, hands shoved in his pockets, looking like he'd just seen a ghost. He looked smaller somehow, less confident. Ron, I said, my tone cool. What are you doing here? He hesitated, looking down before meeting my gaze. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realized I made a huge mistake. I should never have left you like that. I was scared, and I didn't handle it right. Sounds about right, I said, not offering him the seat across from me. So, what do you want? I want another chance, he stammered, his voice trembling slightly. I know I messed up, Molly, but I miss you. I want us to try again. I'll make it right this time. I swear. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms as I looked at him, the man who'd caused me so much pain. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. Ron, I began, keeping my voice even, I don't know what fantasy you're living in, but we're done. I've moved on, and I don't need you to make me feel whole. You threw away what we had because you couldn't handle a little pressure, and honestly, that's not the kind of man I want. He stared at me, his face falling. Molly, please. I love you. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, and shook my head. You loved having someone who'd put up with your excuses, who'd make your life easier, but you didn't love me, not really. And you know what? That's okay. But I'm not going back. I deserve better. He looked like he was going to argue, to plead, but I held up my hand. Take care of yourself, Ron. I wish you the best, but I'm finally living the life I want, without you. With that, I turned back to my book, and after a long pause, I heard his footsteps retreat. He was gone, and for the first time, it felt like really moving on. That was the last time I saw Ron. In the months that followed, my life blossomed. I threw myself into my work, into friendships I'd let slip, into things that made me feel alive. I even adopted another dog for Rusty to keep him company, a little mutt named Bella. I went back to Zilker Park, the place where Ron and I had first met, and felt nothing but peace. I had healed, and in a way, I was grateful. Grateful to have been shown that I deserved so much more than what I was willing to settle for. Grateful that, through all the pain, I found my strength. And now? I was ready for whatever lay ahead, no wedding plans, no timelines, no expectations. Just me, living life on my terms. And it felt damn good.